Hi everyone, hope everyone's doing well. This is another video that I'm making in my Bands That Jam series. And as you can see on my screen, this one is on the Doors. And I'll actually show the actual case from this show and CD release. And this is from a Doors release from 5 to 1970, live in Pittsburgh. And I want to kind of get into this show, but I want to make a couple comments before I do. Um, First thing is, I've been feeling a little bit under the weather, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is it's making my voice a little bit harsher than it normally is, and also every now and again I have a little bit of a cough, so I'm not sure if this is an allergy thing or sinus or cold thing. But the other point of it being is that I started this YouTube channel in the summer. I made an intro video, and then I made a video on some Star Wars items, and then I stopped making videos for a while, played around a little bit here and there, but didn't release anything. But since I haven't been feeling well, it's prevented me from doing other stuff, and I've been able to make these videos, which I've been really enjoying. So I hope that someone will actually see these and enjoy them and comment or just whatever, get something out of it. But so happy to be able to do this. I wanted to share that, but also just to illustrate that I have a little bit of a, again, a little bit of a whatever it's an allergy or cold thing going on that's kind of messing with me that might prevent some of the clarity on these videos. I kind of noticed that from the other two videos I did recently. And again, as I said, this is my third video in a matter of 3 days. And this one, again, is on the Doors, their show in Pittsburgh in 5 to 1970. Now, one thing I'm also going to try and do is I'm going to cut down on the length of these videos, starting with the past two videos I've done. I've explained what a band that jam is in more detail. I'm just going to add a little bit of detail to the Doors and how they fit into that category. And then we're going to get right into talking about the show. So the Doors fit into a band that jams category because they hit all the marks as a band that jams. They don't have the most wide variety of repertoire in their live shows. They also do have some songs that are jam vehicles that can definitely, do a bunch of different things in terms of improv and things of that nature. So that's really cool. And that's usually what jam bands do, um, or bands that jam do, excuse me. But as I just slipped up there, the Doors also, of all the bands I've reviewed, and I just did a video 2 days ago on Pink Floyd, and then yesterday was on Led Zeppelin. The Doors, to my surprise, even though they classify as a band that jams, they're the closest to a jam band, such as the Grateful Dead and Fish being the primary jam bands that I think of, and I think a lot of people may think of. And the reason why I say that is, along with having all the check marks of a band that jams, they do some things that jam bands do, which includes having a lot of crazy twists and turns in their shows. So the repertoire is not that big, but they did switch up, the order of songs in their set list. But what makes them so interesting is that Jim Morrison, and there's a history of a lot of interesting behavior. He leads the band through his lyrics and his changes and some of his antics, which aren't always bad on stage. And the band, they're awesome on their own right. They're able to follow along with that. So they are able to do improv and things of that nature in a unique way. And they're very close to what other jam bands do in terms of songs not always sounding the same, the way songs can segue into another. And as a matter of fact, the Doors have some common segues or medleys that they do that, again, a lot of bands that jam don't. The only reason why I don't put them in a jam band category completely is because they didn't have a long time touring. The band formed in late 65, and by 1971 they were broken up, at least for the most part, because Jim Morrison had stepped out from the band at that point. So their live touring days were limited really to a very large tour in 1967 and in 1968. Had some pretty interesting things happen in 1969, including an incident in Miami, which, if you're a fan of the Doors, you will probably be familiar with that. And if you're not, that's something for a video for another day. But in 1970, and let's get to the show at hand and talk about the Doors in 1970, they were a band that, did not have too many live show performances in that year. And part of it had to do with what happened in 1969 at the Miami incident. And just essentially just give perspective, Jim Morrison, the Doors, but especially Jim Morrison, were effectively canceled before canceling was a label, way back when in 1969. So it was hard for them to put together and book shows after this incident in Miami, but they managed to get 21 live shows in 1970, which isn't a lot for other bands, but for them it was. And what's even more amazing is the Doors, their organization or whatever you call it, their the agency, whatever, the band, they have released 11 of those 21 shows, and there's also a bootleg of another show from 1970. So you can get your hands on 12 of these shows. So let's get into the show at hand to save some time here. So the show, again, the Doors in Pittsburgh, 5270. And I'm going to flip over to Wikipedia because this helps me to illustrate the set list, and I can talk about a couple of details or a lot of details of the show. So the song or the show starts off with Backdoor Man. Oh geez, I cannot speak today. I apologize. That's whatever I got going on with this sinus thing messing with me. But they start with Backdoor Man, and what they do, and this is not tracked and listed in their CD cases, but it would be if the Grateful Dead was handling it. Is they go in from Backdoor Man, they go right into Love Hides, right here, and then they go in the 5-1. Now, being a Deadhead, first and foremost, if I was listing this, I would actually have the arrows denoting the segue from one song into another, and the Doors do a lot of that in this show, so I'll make sure to point that out. So Backdoor Man goes into Love Highs, goes into 5-1. These are great tunes. They're played very well. The band's on point. Love Hides is sort of like a weird lyrical interlude between the two songs in that they're still kind of playing the Backdoor Man music, but then Jim changes up the lyrics again. One of their ways of doing their improv was Jim leading the way and the band following on. That's a great example of that. So it's a great start of the show. And then we get in the Roadhouse Blues, which the band starts off ripping because Roadhouse Blues is a ripping tune, with the exception that Jim Morrison's a little bit more subdued in his lyrics, in his delivery. But if you know this song, and if you don't, I'll explain that next part of the song where there's some guitar jamming and, Robbie Krieger's really leading the way with that. And then it gets to a point, as it always does in a live show, where Jim does this sort of vocal scat rap thing. I think that's how you would call it. And he starts that off again a little more subdued, not as energized or sort of in your face that he normally would be with that. But he builds up with that, and as he builds up, the band builds up with the music, and it really, really gets to a point where he's just doing his lines where you got to roll, 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 and if you know the song, he goes through that a lot, and it really starts to build up, and it turns into something that was starting very subdued and really has a nice crescendo. So overall, great performance on that. Now, the next thing we have is another segue of songs: Mystery Train, Away in India, and Crossroad Blues. Excuse me, there's that cough coming up. Now, again, it's not listed that way on the CD, but these three songs go into each other. Now, Mystery Train is a blues cover, and the Doors did a lot of blues cover. Jim Morrison had a thing with that, so a lot of their live material had, like, even if it was their own song, was a bluesy type song, or they would cover blues tunes. And so Mystery Train goes into some pretty cool jamming that includes Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger trading off licks. It's really cool to listen to that. And then they go into Away in India, which is really a Jim Morrison, composition of poetry and lyrics. And it's kind of played over the existing jam that was coming through with Mystery Train. So again, this is where he switches things up with his lyrics, and the band sort of kind of catches on that and rides that sort of wave. And then it goes into Crossroads, or Crossroad Blues. Now, Crossroads is a pretty popularly covered blues tune. I know Eric Clapton is the person I think of who did that, which I think he might have done that with Cream, but I'm sure he played it solo as well. This Crossroads still was sort of in the vein of what the Mystery Train sort of music theme sounds like, but eventually they kind of switch a little full into the way that song is played, and that's a Robert Johnson cover, as you can see here. So very cool. Nice another segue of three songs in this show, and the band's really rocking on. They sound really on point. They're not making any mistakes, and Jim Morrison's not too far gone one way or another, so it's really good. And then we get to Universal Mind. This song is a standalone, and this is one of those signature Doors tunes. And when I say signature Doors tunes, Yeah, the Doors had this reputation of being kind of weird. I mean, I think they were perceived as weird because they had no bass player for starters when they were, in the band, but also some of the things, the lyrics and antics, kind of put them in a sort of weird state. And this song kind of really emulates that. It has lyrics about, I think how it goes, something like you know you're going to die or something like that comes in the lyrics. So there's a chorus, I should say. So it's pretty wild. And then you have a song "Someday Soon," which again is another one of those little Jim Morrison ditties that he kind of came up with the lyrics. And this one's also in this weird hypnotic vein, but in this song, the way it's played out, as Jim kind of has his sort of downtrodden lyrics being sung through, the band really is able to echo that feel with their instruments, particularly Robbie Krieger. So it's really neat. I really think it's just a really cool song. Again, weird but cool. And then we get to this song here, "When the Music's Over." Now, this is one of their signature jam vehicles that the Doors had. It's a song that almost always stretched out. You could see here just on this timing, it's clocking in at 16 minutes and 54 seconds. And I want to make a point about this. Excuse me, sorry about that. So, the way that this is labeled on the CD, you see "When the Music's Over," then you see "Break On Through to the Other Side," which is a popular song. I'm sure if you're even marginally familiar with the Doors, you would know that song. But you notice it's only played for 54 seconds. Then this "Push Push," which is a lyrical thing by Jim Morrison. Then the "Soft Parade" vamp. This whole section of songs, "When the Music's Over," "Break On Through," "Push Push," "Soft Parade" vamp, it's actually all "When the Music's Over." Again, because they don't list the songs on the CD with the arrows like I would, you wouldn't know that until you listen to it. But what happens is, and I'll break down the actual fullness of the "When the Music's Over" in a second. "When the Music's Over" goes into the short "Break On Through," into the short "Push Push." And again, I apologize that those little screens are popping up because those are hyperlinks. And then "Push Push" goes into the "Soft Parade" vamp. And I'll explain what that is because it's even deceptive how it plays out if you don't know, didn't listen to it. And again, one of the reasons why I think you should check out this CD. So "When the Music's Over" gets started, just to kind of give some information, Jim Morrison does a lot of lyrical improv throughout this song. And if you know this tune or if you don't, in the very middle of this song, the whole band stops playing. And Ray Manzarek just does this rhythmic heartbeat sort of note where he just goes, boom, 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 boom. I'm probably not doing that justice. But when that's going on, Jim Morrison continues with his lyrical improv. And he does some funny things and interesting things. He's making a lot of crazy, weird noises. Some of them are very guttural. Some of them almost have like a sort of a sexual feel to them. Then at times he does these bird sounds like a caw. I mean, it's pretty wild. I think he's even whistling in the microphone. So he kind of gets everyone going, the audience going. It's pretty wild. It's definitely something that I found entertaining. But even if you don't, you're going to want to at least be observant of it because it's different. And then the band gets ready to deliver the explosion of this song, because what this song does is Jim Morrison will eventually deliver this line, "We want the world and we want it." And he pauses so the band can all start to build up tension. And then he explodes with "now," and he screams "now," and the band screams "now." And if you know it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They deliver that really well. But then this is where it gets interesting. The band starts to jam again out from that point. Then they go into "Break On Through to the Other Side" for a little bit. And then this "Push Push," which is just a little bit of lyrics from Jim. You see it's only 23 seconds long. So it's really one of those things I wouldn't even, if I was listening, I wouldn't label it that way. Then they go into the "Soft Parade." Now that's a song from the album, The Soft Parade. And they start to play that song. They start to hit some of the lyrics, Jim singing some of that. But then they switch back, they start to jam, and they get right back into "When the Music's Over." And they finish "When the Music's Over" in this track known as a "Soft Parade" vamp. So to me, in all my music player, I actually have it listed as "Soft Parade" vamp going into the "When the Music's Over." But as the band said, and I'll show you here, even on their write-up, they actually highlight this in their write-up of this CD, saying this highlights include Morrison's improvisational riffing during an exciting 22 plus minute version of When the Music's Over. And again, this is what they're talking about. That's the whole song. So that's really cool. Not that it's 22 minutes long, but that they decided to go through and really take that song through a lot of twists and turns. That's true spirit of a jam band, for sure. And then you get this last part here. Tonight you're in for a special treat, which is just Jim Morrison introducing Ray Manzarek, who will be singing Close to You, which is the next song here. I think he did this pretty regularly when Ray was going to take over. At least I've seen this same kind of labeling at some other shows from 1970. Also, a funny note, Jim Morrison also talks to the audience and sort of pokes fun at security and police. And I think the band tries to really pick up and get this song started just to kind of calm down any potential riot he may be trying to play around and start. So anyway, also in Close to You, Ray Manzarek changes and does some ad-libbing to the lyrics. And he makes one of the lyrics go, I want to get close to you, Pittsburgh, instead of saying I want to get close to you, baby. So really kind of playing off the vibe of the band of the audience. And again, being as I'm from Pittsburgh, I'm a Yinzer. I'm a little biased with this too, so that's kind of neat. But regardless, it's pretty cool that they're playing into the audience and kind of getting them going. And then, of course, the last song is Light My Fire. And if you even know anything about the Doors, you know Light My Fire. It's their most popular song. As soon as they start playing it, there's a bunch of screams from the audience. And the song does as it normally does. There's a middle jam in that song where Ray Manzarek takes the first lead and then Robbie Krieger takes the second lead. Ray takes his lead and he crushes it. He definitely plays things slow and builds it up to a peak. Jim does some occasional yelling throughout, and then Robbie comes in, and Robbie Krieger just takes off. He doesn't build up for a peak; he just peaks and goes after it. There are some points too where, like, as the song is jamming on, Jim Morrison says something to the effect of, "All right, come on, Pittsburgh, let's go." So that's kind of neat too that he was even getting into the whole "let's rev up the audience in a good way" kind of thing. So, but just a point with Light My Fire. There were several other songs that had this example, but it has a pretty extended stretch of just the band jamming and Jim Morrison being awesome and all the unique things that he was. Even without that, it's just amazing to hear the interplay of just these three guys. You have a drummer, which is John Desmore. You have Robbie Krieger, Robbie Krieger, the guitar player, and then Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player, who also played a bass keyboard with his left hand. So, like, for three guys, they got a lot of sound and they had a lot of good interplay. And it really just adds to the dynamic of why this band is so good. And if you don't know why they're so underrated. But overall, I'll just say this. This release is still commercially available from what I can see on the Doors official website here, and we're on that page. You can get it on Amazon, eBay. And if you know the Doors but aren't familiar with their live material, or if you don't know the Doors and you want to turn yourself on to something a little bit different and new, I highly recommend this CD. A lot of their other archival releases, including the ones from 1970, are available, but most of them are on the secondary market and can be pretty expensive to get. They have a release from New York, which is 6 CDs. It's 4 shows over 2 nights. They did a morning and evening show on one day and then did it again. It's a great one, but it's really hard to get in the secondary market in terms of how much it costs. Because it's out of print. So this is a good one. It's obtainable to kind of sort of wet your palate, so to speak, of the Doors and their live performances in 1970. And again, just a little point of this too. The Doors didn't play with Jim Morrison after 1970. They played 2 shows at the end of that year, which I'll talk about another time. And after those 2 shows in December, they didn't never tour with Jim Morrison again. So kind of nice to get this stuff. Kind of nice to see that this stuff is out there. So I highly recommend it, and I hope it, if you watch this video, it piques your interest. You can even, I think, listen to it in other places and stream it, probably on Spotify, I'm sure. I think some people post the whole show on YouTube if you want to check it out. But yeah, highly recommend checking out and or purchasing it if you can. It's a good one to have in your collection. All right, I have some more ideas for some other show reviews in the Bands Jam series I got. I got some ideas I'm going to be doing on some videos on Star Wars and some other items, toy items for Star Wars. And I even have a video I might do on the NFL since that season is currently upon us, as per the making of this video on September 12th, 2023. Everyone, take care, and I will see you guys all in the next video.